Okay, well, good morning again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's agent development training. Thank you all for being here. Looks like we got 20 plus on the call. If you guys would put your name into the chat box so Sandra can keep track of attendance, we would really appreciate that. I just want to tell you guys, we do appreciate your engagement. Cav and Sandra and I, really work hard to pull together good content for you guys, and I'm hopeful that this is helpful. We get a lot of positive feedback, so at least some of you think it's helpful to host these sessions. I know a lot of our new agents are also now engaging in new agent um, roundtable discussions hosted by Sandra in Indiana and hosted by Tyler up in Michigan. And so I'd encourage you guys jump into those as well. Those are maybe a little uniquely different opportunity where there's no agenda, there's no content. It's just like for you to ask questions and talk amongst your peers and people that are newer in the business. So if you're not engaged with that, I'd encourage you to do so, especially if you are a new agent on the team. The focus of today's conversation is really going to be really focused on fact finding, and that's where Steve's going to lead the discussion. But before we do that, I want to share my screen and just show you guys a couple of quick things. Got to figure out which screen I'm sharing here, make sure this all works. Okay, Sandra, can you see my screen okay? The email that I sent out this morning? You seem to be muted, maybe.
It's your goals and game plan.
Okay, cool. So I did send this out this morning, and I just wanted to recap it for all of you. I do think there's some things worth reviewing in here. And then obviously the reason that I sent it, get this blown up a little bit. So I did send you guys an overview of the goals and game plans. And we have two different ones. I probably should have worded them a little differently. One is specifically built for tier one agents, and it's a little bit more simplified version for those of you who are just getting started in the business. One thing that I want to point out on this particular document as we look at it is, really it's designed to be a one-page overview of things and really help you start questioning and asking some of the right questions about, how to build out a business plan and your goals and game plan. I just wanted to point out though, this box right down here is specifically dedicated to asking you questions that pertain to the performance tracker spreadsheet. And whatever you're filling in here should be transferred over to the goals section at the bottom of your performance tracker spreadsheet. So this box here, the big box, is the one that's asking questions that will then be filled in on the PTS. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys and make sure you guys were kind of aware of what the idea was behind that and what we were doing there. Let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing and open this back up. I'm going to share it one more time so I can get the right share this time, hopefully. So that's kind of the first big thing that I wanted to go over. The next thing that I wanted to take a minute to look at is if you are a tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4 agent, we have a little bit more robust goals and game plan document for those of you that are tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. If you're new in the business, we consider professional agents is kind of how Health Markets refers to them. We've referred to professional agents who are above the 50,000 rolling 12-month FYCR mark. We really feel that by the time an agent moves from tier 1 to tier 2 and you become a tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4, you're executing enough transactions to really become proficient in the work that we do. And so that's why we refer to you as a professional agent. So for everybody on the call, our first goal, obviously is to get you to 10,000 FYCRs and then 25,000 and then 50,000. And 50,000 is really that big milestone where your commissions increase and you begin being recognized within the Health Markets ecosystem as a professional agent. So a little bit more robust questions. If you're tier 1, you can look at the professional agent one, and if you want to fill that one out, that's fine. It just, there's a little bit more to it. And then we have also our performance tracker spreadsheet on here. And I had outlined that. I was under the impression, I thought I had included the map of life, and if I didn't, I'll resend that because we do have a map of life document that hopefully was included in this as well. But I'd really encourage you guys here in the month of March. To me, this is the month of planning, maybe a little bit of reflection over what happened over the last contest year. We're all starting fresh here with the new contest year, and we've got 12 months ahead of us to kind of determine what we're going to accomplish both professionally and personally. And I think as you work through some of this, not all of this is professional oriented. I think some of this is really personal as well. one of the things that I started off here with in this particular email is just stating that my personal planning begins with updating a document that I have, which is entitled "What Do I Want?" And this is a document I've had for many years. Many of you have heard me reference it over the years, but it's a document where I am literally spelling out very, very personal things about what I want. Some of those are tangible things. Other things are more, relationships and related to physical fitness and health and, my blood work and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that I think go into what you want, but it should all start there because what you want should really drive what is your why. And then your why drives, okay, what are you willing to do to accomplish the things that you want or to get, to get the things that you're shooting for, both professionally and personally. So I do think this is a good exercise to go through, and I would encourage all of you. I don't think you have to spend a full day on this, although some of you may want to, especially those of you with more robust business structures. But I think taking, an hour, maybe 90 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe it's a half a day to really sit down and pour through this and put a good plan together. We're trying to give you the tools to do that between the goals and game plan, the performance tracker spreadsheet, and then the map of life. And so those are some things to think about. I also kind of outlined here on your map of life. I think you need to build your personal life into the schedule first, and then identify a few things related to the business. You guys have heard me say this a lot, but there are 3 things that drive revenue in this business. We market our business, we schedule appointments, and we run appointments. And so you got to figure out when is the time of day and the time in your schedule when you're going to do those 3 things. And so I think first you've got to identify what days and times are you dialing the phone, texting, and working leads. To me, that's an activity that has to be done by itself. It's hard to commingle that with any other activities. I suggest you identify 2-hour time blocks and have at least 4 or 5 separate time blocks each week for this important task. If you're not doing enough outbound outreach and working enough leads and not making enough text and emails and outbound phone dials, you're not going to have the appointment count that you need to be successful in this business. So to me, it all kind of starts there. And then you've got to identify what days and times you're willing to run appointments or meet with clients. Again, I usually block out a 2-hour time block for that. I think especially as new agents, you should block that out. You may have some travel time in there. It might take you a little bit longer. Eventually you may get to the point where you can do everything inside of an hour, but I think a 2-hour time block is probably appropriate as you're beginning the business. And then last but not least, your marketing time should be kind of a function of when you're running appointments. If you want to run 10 appointments in a week and you've got 10 2-hour time blocks blocked out, if you don't have someone to meet within that hour or that 2-hour time frame, you should immediately flip into marketing. And what can I do to market myself, promote my business? And there's a lot of different activities on the performance tracker spreadsheet that can allow you to do that. And then kind of my last thought around this is around just setting yourself up so that at the end of each week, you can answer a few questions. And a mentor early in my career kind of set me up to be able to answer these questions. And I think they are important questions to be able to answer at the end of each week. And the questions are simply, what were my activity and production goals for the week? Did I hit the goals this week? If not, why not? And what am I going to do to tweak my goals or activity for next week? If you can build a system where you have the data to be able to ask and answer those questions at the end of each week, I don't think you're going to end up out in left field, 90 days into the business or 6 months into the business. So to me, those questions allow you to do a subtle tweak each week to keep yourself on track with what you're trying to accomplish. And I think one of my biggest encouragements here would be that, this business isn't easy, but you do have to put in 40 hours a week, right? If you put in 40 hours a week, marketing your business, scheduling appointments, and running appointments, eventually you will get to the point where you are hitting 750 to 1,000 points a week on the performance tracker spreadsheet. And that level of activity will begin generating sales and FYCRs and revenue for you. So it's just a matter of making sure that you're on the right track with that. So last thing I wanted to do before I kind of turn things over to Steve is I wanted to look at the Resource Center and just remind you guys that right here on the Resource Center, there is, where did it go? Oh, I'm not on the home screen. It's like trying to find our training calendar. There it is, right there on the home screen. If you guys click on this training calendar, Health Markets is continuing to add a lot of additional things to the training calendar. And especially if you're new, you got to be a sponge. You got to be a student of your business. And I would encourage you to jump on every single training you can possibly jump on. until you feel that you're proficient in a lot of this stuff. I just wanted to remind you that today is March 4th. And so this afternoon, there's an Accident Pro Series and Accident Wise event that's at 2 o'clock p.m. Central Time, which is what, 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, where most of us are. If you're planning to engage in Medicare, tomorrow we've got a Connect Your Basics. They're also going over Dental Wise later in the week and Hospital Wise and Advantage Guard. These are all product reviews that I think you should jump on. If you're in your first 6 months, you need to understand this Agent Accelerator and the contest overview. Jump on that one. Why cross-selling is important. This is next week that we're getting into. And you can see through the end of March, we have some really great trainings. What I have asked Rachel to do is I've asked her to load these into everybody's schedule so that you don't have to go back and load them yourself. They should already be loaded into your schedule. All you've got to do is accept them and earmark them and make sure that you're on those, all of those trainings. I feel like Health Markets is doing a lot right now to pour into training, more so than we've ever done. And some of these national events and national calls, I think you're remiss if you miss them. So with that, I'm going to pivot over and let Cavajola take over here for the rest of the morning. I may have a few pieces of commentary throughout his comments, but Cav, appreciate you being with us again. We're obviously continuing this journey on our 12 modules. I think this is module number 5 today that we're working our way through. If you guys remember last week, we talked, about working the phones and gave you some scripting around that. I will tell you again, just to recap what we talked about last week, the way you're going to get good at working the phones is to make a lot of phone calls, right? And I'd encourage you, if you're not yet where you want to be in the business and you're not making a minimum of 250 to 300 outbound dials a week, that's where you should start. And it starts with those time blocks of dialing sessions that we talked about, a little bit ago. So our next phase in this is what happens when somebody wants to talk to you. And so, last week we really talked about qualifying the need and qualifying the process. So making sure that there is a need and making sure they're willing to engage in the process that we want them to engage in. That 2-step approach of fact finding and then, positioning statement. So Cav, I'm going to let you take things over here. We're going to spend time today on fact finding and why it's such an important, essential part of the equation. I do know as Cav and I talked and kind of preparing for this, Steve's working with a lot of you on a one-off basis or even in small groups. And one of the things that he commented on, which kind of surprised me, he said, I see a lot of our new agents doing no fact finding and just coming in with a solution. And so I just want to encourage you. I had a conversation yesterday with a newer agent in our Michigan market who, we were talking about, I'm like, there's so many opportunities just by asking questions and becoming a true advisor. There's so many opportunities that you can open up with the right sequence of questions. And so hopefully Cav can kind of pull back the onion a little bit on that and help us understand why that's so important. So Cav, the floor is yours, my friend.
All righty. All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about fact finding today. And again, I do meet with a lot of new people. And I don't think they truly understand just how powerful the fact finder is. And so I want to start off with this just by giving you some thoughts on how I view the fact finder. I know Silas is going to agree with a lot of this. But basically, the very first thing that I want people to understand is the fact finder is a strategic tool. It's a tool, okay? And if you use it correctly, it can unlock potential sales that will help you create a client for life. One of the things I think I can't remember which session it was, but I always look at my interactions with new prospects as I'm not looking to sell them anything. I'm looking to create a client for life, which means we're going to do business over time. Now, one of the nice things about it is our primary business, being health insurance or Medicare, the way that it's set up now is we need to engage with our customers every single year during the open enrollment. So it's kind of a built-in thing. But the other thing is our clients' needs are going to change. And so as their needs change, developing that relationship to where they just come to you it just opens up a whole bunch of additional business that will eventually get us to the point where, Silas showed this a couple of weeks ago, where, people are making two, three, $400,000 a year. Because it's not that we're finding a bunch of new people, we're finding a bunch of new people and we're helping them a bunch of different ways. And so what I have found when I have talked to new reps about the Fact Finder, most of them just look at this as something else to do rather than a tool that can take your business to new levels. It's almost like, it's kind of like they almost have the same attitude as like their parents tell them to clean their room when they were kids. It's like, I just got to do it. I don't want to, but I got to. And I think if you'll just change your attitude on the Fact Finder and really learn how to use it to your advantage, even during the open enrollment, because again, a lot of the context of people who didn't do the Fact Finder, it was the quote unquote busyness of the open enrollment. Guys, the open enrollment is not an excuse not to use the Fact Finder. We have always got to figure out what's going on in the world. The other thing that we have always talked about is the Fact Finder is an offensive and a defensive tool to help uncover your prospects' needs, as well as protect you from future complaints. Because there are people that get complaints where, whenever something doesn't go right for you new people, even if you did everything right, the easiest person to throw under the bus is the agent. And so if you don't have a proper Fact Finder and you're not making the recommendations based on what they told you, it's kind of it's kind of your word versus their word. Where he just, I didn't, and again, there's a lot of people within our company that get in trouble for just jamming things down people's throats, making them take things they might not need. And then all of a sudden the customer complains, they cancel, it hurts their persistency. Why? Because they're just going into every appointment with this idea of, I'm going to sell you what I want to sell you, and I'm not really going to take the time to learn what you need. And so that's why it's an offensive and defensive tool, because we can find out what they need, and then we can protect ourselves if anything ever comes up to where we can justify the reason I recommended these products is they told me this. Okay. They told me that, they didn't have any income protection. They told me they didn't have any life insurance, whatever it may be. Because again, if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will happen to you in your career, where you're going to be getting a phone call from Silas and the company's going to be sending basically this scary document telling you there's a complaint against you and you need to fill all this out. Well, and I've only gotten a handful of those in my whole career, but it's never been a big deal to me because I've always kept good notes on what I do. And so all I had to do was go back to my Fact Finders and I have, once I send the form back in, I never hear anything ever again. So the company's like, yep, he did what he was supposed to do. Okay. So Silas, I know with you being a sales leader, the whole protecting yourself is a big deal. So do you have any comments on the whole defensive part?
Not a lot more than what you said. I will tell you that any complaints, and we are very, very blessed. I will say our territory, when we compare it to every other territory in the nation, has the lowest complaint history and ratio. And we have had in the last 12 months, 0 founded complaints within our territory. I will tell you a lot of other territories can't say that. And I don't want to give you the perception that a lot of other agents in the country are doing things incorrectly. A lot of times it's just not taking the time and explaining things, or a client not understanding things appropriately. I will tell you, you are the best in the country when it comes to quality ratings and the low level of complaints that we have versus the volume of business that we actually write. But when you look nationwide, we have about 1% of the new clients that we bring on board that end up filing some sort of a complaint that we have to deal with. Fortunately, less than that are actually founded. But having this documentation just covers your butt. And I'll tell you, when you have an investigation, it might be Holt Markets asking for an internal proactive audit of some sort. It might be an insurance company coming and asking questions. It might be a Department of Insurance or an attorney general. I mean, we're kind of working our way up the hierarchy here of, you know, how big of a deal it actually is. But things happen, you know, people have the ability to file complaints with the Department of Insurance and say that I was wronged in some way. And having the documentation from a conversation you had 3 months ago or 3 years ago or 8 years ago can be really, really helpful in making sure that you can navigate that and get through those types of realities. If you're in the business long enough and you write enough business, you are eventually going to have to deal with someone complaining about something that you did or thinking that you did something you know, incorrectly or nefarious. And that's part of dealing, you know, with human beings, right? Humans are messy. And so it's going to happen one way or another. So I do agree with you. I talked to Chris Mason a lot, who's our senior vice president, and he sits on the board of individuals who reviews every single complaint that comes through. And he said, the vast majority of the time when a complaint is founded and it goes against the agent in some way, it's because they didn't have the documentation. They didn't have the visual evidence to be able to substantiate their side of the story. It was a he said, she said. And maybe the client had documentation and the agent didn't. So document well, use your fact finder, put notes into the CRM. All those things are really, really important ways to protect yourself.
Sandra, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you kind of hit on that too, Silas. Just a quick example of in my former life, I had an agent who had a complaint filed against them by IDOI. And it was just a simple situation where the client actually called the insurance company just to ask a simple question. And the rep actually said, didn't your agent go over that with you? And it was about like the Part D deductible. And they said, oh, well, I think she did. But because we had a document, but what happened was the insurance company filed the complaint on behalf of the client to the Department of Insurance. So those very simple inquiries that somebody might even not realize could generate a complaint, but we had it backed up.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. The best way to protect yourself is quit going in and selling a product that you think they need. When you start allowing them to custom design the products around their needs and their budget, you're not going to get very many complaints because you're showing them solutions to the problems they self-identified. So that's another reason why I'm a big proponent of the fact finder. It's because no one's going to complain on something they told me they needed. But if I just go in and jam a bunch of stuff down their throat because that's what I want to sell, that's when bad things happen. So now the fact finder can be done electronically in the CRM, or you can purchase them from Marketing on Demand. So again, I'm a big proponent of I buy my own fact finders. They're actually created to be like a file folder. So that's what I like to do. Now I know Silas, he likes to do everything electronically. The point is, there's nothing wrong with either one of those. Do the one that you're the most comfortable with. You know, so a lot of times people will ask me, well, which one should I do? Should I have the manual one, or should I do the one in the CRM? And my first question is, can you type? Because if you can't type, don't do the electric one. Now, Silas, he can type like a legal secretary. I mean, the dude just we'll sit there and be doing a leadership meeting, and he's like taking notes on stuff, and it's just, and I'm like, how does he type that fast? But he's good. So that's not a big deal. But if you're kind of a hunt and peck kind of guy, write it out. But I do believe that the only two ways you should be doing it is either in the CRM or buy them from Marketing on Demand, because it'll make you look more professional. Guys, when you come in with just a piece of paper that you're just scratching notes on, or there's something about having these kinds of visual tools that give you credibility. So if I'm doing something virtually and they're actually watching me type things on the CRM, because when I do it virtually and I'm doing a fact finder like that, I'll do it right in front of them. Or if we're doing it face to face, I open this thing up and I'm just asking questions, and it just gives us this look of being a very professional organization. Okay. The other thing it does is it makes these people think man, this guy's actually taken the time to learn about me before he ever shows me anything. Again, it's all credibility. It's giving your prospects this feeling like they matter, because most of the people they're talking to, especially if they do this over the phone, these people, these salespeople want them to buy something and they don't even know anything about the people. Okay. So that's why doing a fact finder, it makes you more professional. So either do it in the CRM, buy them from Marketing on Demand. They're not that expensive. And it'll make you look more professional. And then again, the fact finder allows you to diagnose before you prescribe. I know Silas will jump in here because that's where I got that, little sentence from. But how can I really help my prospect unless I know what's really going on in their world? When you go to a doctor, does he just walk in and say, here's a pill? No, he asks a bunch of questions. Why? Because if he prescribes the wrong thing, he can go to jail. Well, guess what, guys? If we prescribe the wrong things, we can lose our license. Okay? It's a big deal. We're professionals just like doctors. We have to get certifications every year. We have to get a professional license, and it can be taken away from us if we don't stay within the guardrails. And I have just found that the fact finder is the best way to stay within the guardrails, because it tells me what they need. It tells me it tells them that they matter to me. And it's something that every time I meet with someone, I have my fact finder with me, whether it's on the computer or it's manual. So Silas, do you have anything here to add before I move
Oh,
on?
do I have something to say? Yes, I do. Um, so
Well, we
I
only
would
got
also
30
say,
minutes and I got a few more things. So
well, I think at some level too, especially if you're a new agent, you have to take the work that you do very, very seriously. And I think sometimes we feel like we're not on the same level with, other professionals like attorneys and CPAs and doctors. I'm actually preparing, we're doing a tier 3 and tier 4 event at Notre Dame tomorrow for our tier 3 and tier 4 agents. Dan Garrison's flying in from California actually to be with us tomorrow. And one of the things that I'm going to be going over with our agents tomorrow is that the average tier 3 and tier 4 agent in our territory had a cash flow in 2024 that exceeded $400,000. Many of the agents that are a part of our organization make more money than doctors do. And I think we have to recognize that we are professionals and we have to operate very similar to professionals. And I tell my clients this, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the work that I do is very much like that of a medical practitioner. And what I mean by that is I have to diagnose before I prescribe, Todd. I can't just give you a solution. And I think when you talk to clients like that, it elevates you in their mind, how good you are, the importance of what you do. Talk to them like you are a professional. And I love this whole idea of diagnosing before we prescribe, because if you really start thinking about your role in helping guide your consumers to the right insurance packages to protect them from catastrophic financial situations, and I think some of that's internal. We have to internalize the fact that what we do is really, really important work, and it is up there with the attorneys and the CPAs and the financial planners and the doctors of the world. When you start thinking about your career and your profession and who you are and what you do through that lens, it will change the engagement that you have with consumers. And honestly, they will begin to respect you more for the work that you do. So I don't think there's anything wrong with laying that out. I mean, I certainly say this when I'm teaching, you to be successful in this business, but I use the exact same verbiage with my clients to let them know kind of the scope and scale of what I'm going to try to do for them and the angle that I'm coming at this from. So hopefully there's some level of value in that.
all right. Sandra, do you have anything to add or can we continue? All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at the fact finder. So this is some screenshots of what it looks like if you do it electronically. So the fact finder cover, again, I'm just going to kind of talk about how I use it. I'm always going to put this disclaimer in here. I'm showing you how a way to do it. I'm not showing you the way to do it. Everyone uses this differently. But the only thing I can really explain is how I use the fact finder. And then Silas, Sandra, you can jump in if you have suggestions. But one of the nice things I like about the fact finder is I love to, when I meet with someone, I'll put their name and I'll put the date of our first interaction. And again, the reason I do that is when I pull out a fact, I don't do a new fact finder unless someone's been around long enough where I need a new one. But I like pulling it out, looking at it and saying, okay, I've been working with this person since 2019. We've been working together for a long time. So I always put the date of our initial conversation. Sometimes it's a lead call. We're setting the appointment. That's the date I'll put on there. But I like doing this because I use it this way, this is becoming their file. Okay. So I just put on their name and their date. Now, when we look at the page 2, that's what's called the client profile. This is where you're going to kind of get the demographics. So when I'm talking to someone on the phone, when we're setting an appointment, this is usually the page that I will fill out on the phone now. Now, there was a time in the past where I used to fill out page 2 and page 3 on the phone because I needed to gather their health history so I knew what to bring in. Guys, now that we have so many guaranteed issue products, I only do page 1 or page 2 on the phone. I'll do the page 3 when I get there. Because some of you know that the way that I present is I sell and the S is size up their situation by completing the fact finder. That's what I mean. Now, if you want to do the whole thing on the phone, that's fine. For time's sake, it's like, I just want to know who I'm dealing with because when I bring things in, I'm going to have guaranteed issue products as part of my recommendation. So if I get there and find out that they have a history of cancer, it doesn't change anything. Okay. So that's the nice thing about having more and more guaranteed issue products, because there was a time we had no guaranteed issue. And so you had to learn a lot more about them on the initial phone call. Okay. I don't think it's as important anymore as it used to, but if you want to gather it, gather it. Okay. So basically, whoever I'm talking to becomes the client. So I'll put in their name, their date of birth, height and weight, do they use tobacco? And that's about all I gather. Then if they have a spouse, the same thing, and then put in their kids. I find out, first of all, what their home address is. And then under preferred mailing address, I'll put an address in there if they want to meet somewhere else. Maybe they want to meet at their business. So I'll go ahead and put that in there. I'll gather the cell phone if they have it, the email, and then I just kind of mark it on the bottom what they told me why they were looking. Now, one of the reasons why I like using the manual fact finder is because I can actually take notes right on there. So like if I talk to someone who's losing their insurance at the end of the month, I'll actually check through my employer and then I'll put a little note, losing coverage 3/31/2025. So it kind of tells me what we're dealing with. But that's pretty much all I gather so again, when we talked about the phones last week, I kind of showed you the very first thing I'm doing is verifying the need. Is this lead legit? The second thing I'm doing is scheduling the appointment. And actually, the third thing I do is I start the fact finder, which means I gather this information. Okay. Now, page 3 is what's called the needs analysis. Page 3 and page 4 is where all the action happens. Okay. And like I said, you can gather this information on the phone if you want to. You can gather it when you meet. It's totally up to you. But one of the things that I have found is a lot of people create their own fact finders because they don't like the questions on here. Okay. And I still like to use the company fact finder for everything. So I just create my own questions and I just use things in here to kind of prompt me on what I'm asking. And so when I'm asking this page where it says insurance company, I basically want to know 2 things. What kind of health plan are they used to? because keep in mind, guys, if they're coming from corporate America into the marketplace, it really doesn't matter what insurance company they had. Okay. But it does matter what they're used to. Are they used to funding an HSA? Are they used to a high deductible plan? Are they used to a copay plan? I kind of want to know that stuff so I know what I'm dealing with. Okay. The other thing I want to know is what is their hospital of choice if they need to go somewhere, because again, the biggest difference between our marketplace plans is not the coverage, it's where can I go? And so knowing what their hospital of choice is will narrow it down. Do I show them CareSource? Do I show them Priority, Blue Cross, Ambetter, whatever, okay? I don't really pay attention to the doctor visits and all that kind of stuff. But why are they looking for coverage at this time? That's where I'll put their special enrollment. Now, if it's during the open enrollment, I'll just put OEP. But if they have a special enrollment, I'll pop it in there. And that's pretty much all I do for the health plan. Now, this second part is the health history is important for the health insurance, but to me, the health history is more important for the supplemental products, okay? And so I like to ask them, in the last 5 years, have you had a history of cancer, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, other chronic illnesses like severe asthma, irritable bowel, sleep apnea? And if they answer yes, I will actually put the number of the person. So the first person is number one, the spouse is number two, the oldest kid. And that tells me that in this case, the primary person had sleep apnea, cut his hand, had a surgery. And then, you can kind of do this. And then for the medications, I don't really ask what medications they're on right now. I just want to know, what are you taking medications for? Okay, so that'll tell me a lot about their health history as well. Once I'm done finding out their health history, now I'm moving into the income protection portion of the questions. And the question is, if a major illness or injury caused you to miss work, how long would you be able to continue to pay your monthly bills without income? Now, some of you have heard me say this before. I'm not fond of this question because it doesn't relate to everybody we talk to. Because if I'm talking to someone who's 62 that's retiring and it's going to live on a pension and Social Security, that question is irrelevant. So what I've just learned to ask people is, we just got done talking in the P4L, which we're going to talk about next week. We just got done talking about medical bankruptcy due to lost income and stuff. Do you have any income protection like AFLAC, disability, anything like that? And if they say no, I just put in no income protection, and I'm going to use that later on in life. And then obviously, if they have no income protection, I could just ask, well, then is access to cash at a time of a critical illness to pay deductibles, co-pays, daily necessities important to you? If their income comes from a job, is continuing to receive income if you're sick important to you? And it's either yes or no. Then I'll ask where it says, have you had dental coverage in the past? I just ask, is dental important to you? Then I'll go down, does anyone in your family wear glasses? Is vision important to you? Because if they tell me it's not important, I'm not going to show them a dental or vision quote. But if they tell me it is, I will. And then I actually, I don't get the life insurance information until after the appointment. I end my initial appointment and then we kind of transition into life insurance. But this is where you can find out how much life insurance they have. Do they have it? How much? Now, one of the things I do is where it says, how much are you paying monthly? That's where I just put the spouses in. So the first line is, usually I know who the primary breadwinner is because we've already done the ACA application. So I'll just say, okay, Silas, it sounds like you're the primary breadwinner. Do you have life insurance, yes or no? And if so, how much? Then how much does Chris have? Is it term or permanent? Is it part of an employer? And I'm just gathering those information. Now, where it says, can you collect insurance while you're living? This is where I ask the question, do you have the old type or the new type? Now, I'm not going to go any farther. That's a whole nother training we'll do in a few modules, but it's a great way where you can transition into life insurance regardless of how much they have. But this is where I gather the information for life insurance. And then the last page
Hey,
of
Kev,
the,
Kev,
yeah,
before you move past that, can you back up one? Sorry.
yeah,
I also think in the middle of that page, like that whole question around where Cav addresses it, income protection. Like if you're not having some level of conversation with your client, and you can build this conversation how you want. Some people like to ask, like, do you have an emergency fund, right? I mean, the reality of it is most Americans don't have an emergency fund. You know, most health insurance products we're selling today have out-of-pocket maximums of $7,000 to $10,000 per person. And so, however you want to craft these questions, but it's really getting to the core of what would you do if a catastrophic event hit and you had to come up with $7, 8, 9, $10,000, plus you would have lost income. Like, are you in a position to deal with that? So whether it's asking if they have income protection, whether it's asking, you know, how long they could survive financially if they had a major illness or a major accident, whether it's asking if they have an emergency fund of some sort or resources that they can draw on. You know, these are not invasive questions. They might be a little invasive, but I think they're appropriate questions to be asking if this client has asked you to be their trusted advisor. Where if you've gotten to this point in the conversation, they have agreed and given you a ton of information already up front. This is really good stuff that you need to make sure that you ask the questions on. And this all substantiates the need for supplemental insurance is what this does. I've always said that a fact finder should be, you know, a delicate manipulation and conversation. Somebody always very early in my career said it should be like a good date. And I know I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. And I kind of think that's how it is, but it should be back and forth. It shouldn't be an inquisition or a grilling of the client. It should be a conversation with them to understand what kind of resources they have in place and what they're wanting from you to help them protect those resources. And so, you know, the beauty of supplemental insurance is that it can create an emergency fund in the moment. You know, when there's a catastrophic event that transpires. And so however you guys want to do this, I just think you've got to hone and craft and build this the way that it's going to make most sense for you. I think the fact finder is a great outline for this as Cav is you know, kind of going through it. But I also think, like Cav, you've got to make it your own. You've got to develop this tool and figure out how are you going to best leverage it to get clients and ask questions in a way that you help clients self-identify needs maybe they didn't even know they had. And ultimately, that's at its core what you're trying to do here. You're trying to ask questions in a way to help clients self-identify needs that maybe they didn't even know that they had. And if you can do that, and the client is the one telling you what they don't have or what they need, I can tell you this is sales, but it's not slamming something down somebody's throat, right? It's delivering what they're saying they want and what they need. And that's a much more consultative approach to selling. So hopefully that's helpful.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of forgot an important point of, you know, like I said, I used to ask this page on the phone. And when I got to the supplemental questions, I used to have to put some context in it on, you know, because again, it's like I'm asking all the right questions for a health insurance appointment. Then all of a sudden I'm asking about income protection, and it was kind of awkward. So I had to create like a little, now let me give you some context on why I'm asking these questions. I don't have to do this anymore because since I'm doing this after we've set the appointment and after I've already done the P4L, I've introduced the concept of medical bankruptcy. And now this makes perfect sense on why I'm asking these questions now, because of what we just went through the P4L slides. And so it's just a logical, it's not like, where's this coming from? It's a logical sequence now that I just find for me works a lot better because it has more meaning when I ask the income protection questions after I've already introduced the concept of medical bankruptcy. So kind of think of that, okay? Now, as far as the last page, this is the financial snapshot. There's two very important parts on here. The first one is what's called the life needs analysis, because again, when you start introducing life insurance, according to LIMRA, which studies all this stuff, most people are 100 to 300,000 short on what they actually need because they don't take the time to do a needs analysis and they just pick a number out of the air. And so once we kind of introduce life insurance and start asking them and now we can find out what quote unquote their number is, we can actually come back and give them recommendations on plans that are going to give them the life insurance they need. Okay? Because we've asked the questions, no one else has really asked them. So that's the dime or the needs analysis. Now, the financial snapshot, these are questions you can start asking people that are going to start uncovering some bigger, what we like to call the elephants in the life insurance world. So the life needs analysis, that's kind of like shooting rabbits and squirrels. You just do that to eat. The financial snapshot is where you're going to find some of your bigger life cases. And again, as new people, I don't think you need to be as worried about this as you do being able to do a good needs analysis and protect them with term insurance. But the nice thing about the financial snapshot, it creates other areas of needs. Like, for example, is providing educational funds for my children important to you? Well, I know it asks education up here, but Silas and I, we kind of do this as end of life. Because I believe that if someone wants educational funds on their kids, I think that should be its own separate policy. Because if I have a 15-year-old, I really only need to cover educational needs for about 10 years, because once he hits 25, 26 years old, he should be done with at least his undergrad. So I don't need to put the educational in a 30-year term. Okay, so I have a lot of individual policies where I'm just providing educational funds. Then is saving a fixed percentage of your income. We have things like Index Universal Life that you can actually use as a retirement mechanism. Providing long-term care funds. We have a lot of permanent life insurance plans that we call hybrid plans that can provide long-term care coverage to people. Having insurance on your children. We've got some really cool children's policy with Mutual of Omaha and Securian where we can take care of that. Now, usually paying off the mortgage and allowing my family to maintain their standard of living, that should be addressed up here. But if they're self-employed, we can use life insurance for business continuity. If they become disabled, this is where you can start getting in touch with people if they're interested in disability products, because we have the Plus Group and stuff like that. But the nice thing about the financial snapshot is once you establish a relationship with people, these are things you can start talking about over time, and these eventually become some of your bigger cases, especially when it comes to like long-term care, disability, stuff like that. So, Silas, do you have any comments on this kind of stuff? Because I know you write a lot of big policies with this kind of stuff.
I would say a lot is relative. I'm a little embarrassed by our collective life insurance sales and my personal life insurance sales this last year. I will say,
I'm talking history. I'm not talking last year.
I have written some of the largest cases, I think, in our territory over the years, and a lot of it is, you know, as a follow-up to the health insurance and supplemental insurance or the Medicare sale. And interestingly enough, a lot of those big cases that I've written have happened in March and April and May, where that's when I'm circling back and doing policy reviews and utilizing some of these conversations that we had during the open enrollment period. I think I've got 4 or 5 right now that are big life insurance / long-term care cases that, you know, we're working on right now. So I may have a few of those that pop as well. But I do think, you know, the big part of this is I think so many of us get so busy, and I'm guilty of this as well. You know, especially during open enrollment, you're moving quick. You got people lined up waiting to talk to you. And oftentimes we cut corners, we shortchange things, and we don't ask the appropriate questions. I think that's what a fact finder does such a wonderful job of forcing us to do, is make sure that we stay on track. Just like, and we'll talk about this next week a little bit more, just like when you're going in and doing your protection for life and you're walking through a series of things you want to make sure your client understands so they can be a good consumer. I think having a crutch or a tool is very appropriate. And clients, it shows a level of professionalism that you might not otherwise show or demonstrate. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, whether it's a fact finder or even a outline for your protection for life. But I do think it's important to introduce that to the client and tell the client I've taken time to put together some things that I want to make sure we cover. And I've got a list here that I want to make sure we don't miss anything. Same thing that's happening with this fact finder. So I think clients appreciate that level of professionalism and that attention to detail, because what you're doing is helping them make very, very important decisions. So you guys have some questions in there. I see Stefan and Kate around long-term care and life insurance. So the answers would be yes, Stefan. We do use the Omaha Children's Whole Life. I do like the Securian Life, Secure Promise a little bit better. And then Kate, you know, we have long-term care options with Mutual of Omaha, and then we have hybrid options through Transamerica and Securian Life. I'll answer those questions, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because we're actually going to be addressing both of those things a couple of weeks from now. So if you have one-off questions, I just encourage you to get with your sales leader on that in the meantime, in the short term, but we will be addressing that a little bit more in depth in a few weeks. That's one of our future modules coming down the pike.
Can I add one thing though, Silas?
Yeah, sure.
Mutual of Omaha, 20% higher commission for the same product for kids.
Yep.
I mean, they're both good plans, but the Mutual of Omaha, you can get more earlier, because the Securian, the nice thing is it doubles, where with Mutual, you can kind of get what you want early, and it's a higher commission. But the biggest reason I like that is they have a 2-page brochure that has all the rates in it. So you don't have to go to Securian and print rates. You can just open a book and show them, so it's quick. Long-term care, it all depends on what people need, because there's different things. But like I said, we're going to hit that very hard in a few weeks. But before you even start thinking about long-term care and stuff, and I'm going to talk about something Silas just echoed, we're not helping people with their needs, their immediate needs if someone passes away. We're not even doing the little things right as far as getting them their number. And so the biggest thing I think we need to start focusing on is how can we create that conversation where I can do a needs analysis with people and get them what they need if someone passes away. That's where we got to start. And then we can worry about the big, because I always tell people, I don't even talk to people about the bigger life insurance plans until I know their needs are met for the immediate. And that's just a quick, how much debt do you have? How much income do you want? I mean, just doing the dime, because most people, like I said, from LIMRA, it's 100,000 to 300,000 short. And it's funny, when I do the needs analysis with people on life insurance, it's 100,000 to 300,000 short.
And I think a great intro into that, and I asked this question, I should ask it a hell of a lot more, but the question that I asked to lead into that is, has anyone ever done a needs analysis for you for life insurance? And most people are like, no, and they think it's going to be some elaborate thing. I'm like, it'll take us about 3 minutes. Is it okay if we take our time and go through it? And you're going through, you know, wiping out debt, income replacement. So however much you make times how many years worth of income replacement. If you have a mortgage, like paying off that mortgage. And then the E is education or end of life, or both. Sometimes it's both, right? I carry $1 million policy on myself just to make sure that my 3 kids have enough money to pay for college if I'm not here to help them with it, because that's something that's important to me. So, and then, you know, I think you come up with those numbers, and oftentimes people are like, oh my gosh, I don't need that much. Okay, what do you want to back out? Like, this isn't my, these aren't my numbers, these are your numbers. And I think the question that I use a lot is, you know, if you don't come home tomorrow, what do you want to have happen? And that's what life insurance is all about. If you don't come home tomorrow, what are the financial goals that you have for your family and the things you want to make sure they're taken care of on? And just setting a very basic level of those basic things are taken care of. I remember in my late 20s, early 30s, when I had life insurance, but very small amounts. That's when I really like loaded up. That's when I got my first few $1 million of life insurance put into force. And I do remember that sense and that feeling once I had that in place of just like, honestly, peace that if I pulled out in front of a semi tomorrow morning, or I stroked out over something, or, you know, had a heart attack, or I just didn't come home tonight, that financially the family was going to be taken care of. I think that need for that level of peace probably hits home a little bit harder when you have kids or you have people depending on you. You know, I know for me it did. That was a big piece of it for me, is making sure that, you know, my wife and my kids were taken care of. Since then, I think 10 years after that, I added millions more life insurance, because that's one of the dilemmas with life insurance is, you know, at age 30, you have an idea of what you need. And then if your income is growing and your expenses are growing and your family is growing, by the time you hit 40, you look, reevaluate it. And I know at 40 for me, I was like, oh crap, I'm like underinsured, even though I have millions of dollars of life insurance, it's underinsured to replace
I know.
if I wasn't here. So I'm gonna mute you, Ashley. I don't think you were planning to chime in on that. So those are just some things to kind of think through, but I do think, you know, having a process, and that's what a lot of this is having a process and sticking to the process when you're engaging with consumers. I go back to, and I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and I actually just stumbled across this book again. There's a wonderful book by the gentleman who founded Starbucks called Onward, and it just talks about, you know, the fact that Starbucks has reached a pinnacle where they're selling cups of coffee for $6, $8, $10, $12 a piece worldwide, and people stand in line every single morning at hundreds or thousands of Starbucks across the world to spend that kind of money. And it really is because of a process that they've implemented, which has developed an experience for consumers who come in there. I spent the weekend in LaPorte, Indiana, Cav, at a volleyball tournament with my mother-in-law and my entire family. And both mornings we had to go through Starbucks because it was right outside the stinking facility we were at. And I think I spent $30 or $40 Saturday morning and Sunday morning at Starbucks on brown water. It was just, and I was thinking about it as we were going through there. It was just crazy. But I think, you know, people are willing to come to that type of an experience. And that's what we have to develop. We have to figure out, how does every client engagement, how do you turn this into an experience that a consumer enjoys, appreciates, and is willing to refer business to? And that's what, you know, at its core, that's what all of this is we think through, what does that first engagement on the phone look like? Or what does that first text that we send them look like? You know, it is uniquely different the way Steve teaches it and the way we implement it. And then what does that first conversation look like? And then what does a fact finder look like? And then what does the protection for life or positioning statement or educational component look like? And then what does it look like to take them through the applications? And then what does the post-sale follow-up process look like? You know, are you really doing a great job of identifying their needs and building the right products to protect them from catastrophic events? And then God forbid those catastrophic events happen. I've said this a few times, but just in the last few years, I've had over $800,000 worth of cancer insurance policies pay out to my clients. And to me, that's where it all kind of comes together and culminates in, wow, I did some really cool things to really protect my clients for some catastrophic types of situations. And now those people that got that money, I can say they're actually raving fans of mine and my agency. And that's what you want to build. There's a great book out there called Raving Fans. You should read that one too. A couple of good books we've mentioned today. But Cav, I think this was really good. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, just one other thing, you know, talking about life insurance, and I know we're going to go into a lot of detail, but a lot of things I hear is reps have a hard time bringing up life insurance because they think it's like, okay, I dealt with all this over here. Now I got to talk about life insurance, and no one wants to talk about it. But one of the reasons why I do the page 3 of the fact finder after the positioning statement is I tie life insurance into one of the reasons why people are filing bankruptcy. So then when I actually get to the fact finder and I want to talk about life insurance, it's not an awkward transition anymore. It's part of the same presentation. Now, we may not deal with the actual life insurance solutions on that appointment. I believe that's a separate appointment. But when I go in there and I show them the 3-component solution to reduce medical bankruptcy in the protection for life, which is health insurance, supplemental, and life, when I go and I start asking the questions on page 3 of the fact finder, whether it's right then and there, it's at the end of the presentation, they don't question why I'm bringing up life insurance. And it's just that little change I made by not asking about life insurance on the phone to asking about life insurance after I'd done the P4L. It's made a bunch of difference where my life insurance is starting to go up again. And that's one of my goals for 2025 is I'm going to really recommit myself to life insurance and really start, again, protecting needs first, get them their number, and then bringing up some of this other stuff that can fill in gaps for other things using life insurance.
And I'll just throw this out there, guys. If you guys haven't embraced and checked out and studied Ethos yet, Ethos is such a simple platform. You don't have to do anything. Just send them your link from your Ethos dashboard, and the client does everything on their own. They're approved within minutes, and they can pick and choose what they want. So we're going to do some additional training around Ethos. I know in Michigan, Gary and Tyler did some recent training. For those of you in Indiana, our March 14th meeting, we're going to be bringing Ethos in. I'm even thinking about things like, why don't you build out an email template and send it out to all of your CRM contacts, just letting them know that you've partnered with a new vendor, Ethos. And Ethos makes it super simple for clients to apply for and get approved for life insurance. They don't have to pee in a cup. They don't have to get blood. They don't have to do a paramedical exam, and policies are issued within minutes. And give them your link, and a consumer can go in there and in less than 10 minutes, they can get approved for and pay for and put life insurance in force. I mean, that's a very simple way to start with things, and you don't have to know anything about life insurance to be able to send that personal link, and they do everything on their end. So maybe it's a matter of just starting there. Maybe it's a matter of your post-sale follow-up process saying, hey, I'm going to send you a link for Ethos, explain a little bit about what the Ethos is, and encourage them to click on it and apply and see what they can qualify for. I mean, they don't have to accept the policy, but the neat thing about it then too is you can actually go into your Ethos platform and dashboard, and you can see all the consumers that clicked on that link. And if they didn't consummate the deal and get a policy, you can go circle back with them and talk to them more about their life insurance needs. A lot of you, maybe not on this call, but a lot of our veterans actually have a lot of prospects in their Ethos dashboard who went online and started an application and never concluded or wrapped things up. So those are wonderful leads to circle back on and just say, hey, I see you had a need for life insurance. It was at least top of mind at one point because you clicked on this link. Let's talk more about it. What can I do to help you with this? So we'll talk more about life insurance in the coming weeks. But let me see, there's something in the chat here. So Kate said, I had a client who was concerned about purchasing Ethos because I've never heard of them. They're afraid if they went bankrupt, how would they be reimbursed? So if they've never heard of Ethos, I mean, Ethos is all over the television and radio today. I mean, they're becoming a massive organization. I wouldn't worry so much about Ethos. Ethos is the platform that allows somebody to get the life insurance. If they're worried about, they should be more worried about the insurance companies that the business is being placed with. And those are all A-rated companies. I mean, that's one of the things that you could maybe point to is, Ethos is just the facilitator of getting you to the right product and underwriting and everything. And then they're placing you with specific insurance companies. And so I guess the financial backing of those insurance companies to me would be more important than the financials of Ethos itself. So,
or Kate, you can just say, okay, you've never heard of Ethos? What insurance company have you heard of? And just go write them a policy with that carrier. Because again, we used to hear that all the time of, well, I've never heard of that. Well, until I met you today, I never heard of you either. I mean, it's kind of a lame thing. There's all kinds of places you can go and get information on companies, but here's the thing about Health Markets that you can be sure of. We don't offer rinky-dink companies. They just never even get contracted with. So if Health Markets is saying you can sell this company, you can rest assured United Healthcare says, yep, they're okay.
Yep. So, well, hey, I appreciate all your engagement and participation. My staff is waiting to use my Zoom account, and I didn't realize that, so I've got to fly. But I hope everybody has a good week. Join us next week. We'll look forward to continuing this conversation then. Take care, everybody. See ya.